Very happy to be here with you all. And let me start by my usual thank yous. And I want to thank you for, or send thank yous to the Museum of Danish America, the Northwest Danish Association, and Desiree, who does the interviews. I want to thank our sponsors, the Scan Foundation, Danish American Heritage Society. Oh, and by the way, if you don't know anything about Danish American Heritage Society, there's another one. There's a pendant to your sisterhood, Marcia. Do let me know if you're interested, because it's very, very cheap and you get wonderful books with lots of stuff about Danish American connections and their meetings and conferences, and especially the conference summer on Midsummer's Eve, etc., and around Midsummer's Eve. In Elkhorn with Tova and the Museum of, or Northwest Danish Association, Museum of Danish America. And finally, I also want to thank the University of Washington Scandinavian Studies Department. And our promotional partners include National Foundation for Danish America, Elverhøj Museum in Solvang, and National Nordic Museum. So if anybody wants to know more about the sisterhood, talk to Marcia. If anybody wants to know more about Danish American Heritage Society, do send me an email and I'll be very happy to share any kind of information. You know, we want to bring you all in and Dane you. And that's because I have a little sign on my bookshelf. You can't see it today, but I'll show you. And it says, happiness is being Danish. So there. Bottom line, happiness is being Danish. And as Tova said, we're going to be talking about Danish murders today. So last year, we read number 8 book in the series by Jussi Adler-Olsen. A very, very popular and very well-selling, best-selling author in Denmark. Also a really nice guy. And Desiree did a great interview. And he's just such a nice guy. And he also has had about a prostate cancer. He's fine now. We are waiting for his 10th book in the series. So this is number 9. And I don't know, he said he was working on it last I talked to him. And so we'll have a 10th book. Hi, Hannah, welcome. And I feel, just to start out with a little bit of maybe unpositive, I don't know if it's negative, but I feel that this book left me on a cliff hanging on, think, when are you going to write that number 10? Come on, hurry up. I don't know if you felt the same way. But apart from that, I really enjoyed the book, and I actually enjoyed reading it again, because the first time I read it, you know, what's happening? What's happening? Turn the pages. What's going to happen? I even skipped to the end to see if anybody died. And oh, you know I do that. But anyway, this is a page turner, and so I can't wait to read number 10, because as he said repeatedly, when he started writing his series, he had the entire story in his head. Just like J.K. Rowling, he started writing Harry Potter. He knew where he wanted to go. And he also knew many political and very current aspects of Denmark and Danishness he wanted to include. So once again, I think he succeeded in bringing, a murder mystery into the political realm, into the social realm, and into the realm which is very much relatable for normal people. So I hope that part of our discussion today, at least, can cover some of these many aspects that I've found, and also that you have found numerous aspects worth discussing in the book. I send you, as usual, a lot of questions. I hope you've added on. And I want to start also, as usual, reading his sentence, which in the book, in the Danish book, is page 98, where Ragnhild, part of the women's group, says, you can call it taking the law into your own hands, but you can also call it timely care or solicitude, because the world becomes a little bit better each time. There we have the motto of vigilantes, or whatever we want to call them. And the other reading that I really think is seminal is also on, it's on page 235. And this is Karl Merck, our protagonist, who says, in a community governed by law, even bastards have to be given a fair chance of surviving, if not for their own sake, then for the sake of maintaining the humanity they so blatantly disregard. I think these are very interesting statements, and I would definitely like to ask you what you think about this entire question about disregarding humanity, being a serial killer, taking the law into your own hands, whether it can be defended in any situation. There's so many things to talk about, and I am leaving it up to you and opening the floor wherever you would like to start.
Okay, I have one point about the first quote. It's interesting because Adam and Deborah, before they were associated with this whole thing, essentially killed the three boys responsible for bullying their son Isaac into suicide. So they seem somewhat different, that their motive was much more personal. And that's something like, okay, I'm a mother. I almost could see myself wanting to do that. Whereas I can't see myself becoming that cold-blooded, systematic serial killer. So to me, that's like two different things. Though Adam seemed to really enjoy it so much that he joined in with great enthusiasm.
Heidi?
I just want to question, is it so different? Regarding what you had said. It just seems like if you're going to participate in any kind of retribution or vigilante acts, you can just justify it, but it's really not justifiable. That whole eye for an eye notion doesn't sit right with me, and it wouldn't. I might feel like killing someone who had a hand in the death of one of my family members, but I wouldn't actually do it because it's counter to what I believe in terms of human life and what is right, and I just have a different perspective about that. So I guess I feel like those acts are not justified, even if they're horrific, even if they hurt others.
No, I didn't say it was justified, and I didn't say it was right. I'm just saying that as a mother, I would want to do that. And then there's the whole thing. I mean, if you look back in history, there was weregild. If you killed someone, you could pay the family compensation. And now we don't do that. We bring someone to trial. So it's this whole, I think it's this whole thing in human nature that needs some kind of satisfaction.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that you thought it was right.
No, that's fine. I didn't misunderstand you. No, that's fine.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to clarify in case you were thinking that that's what I meant.
No.
Desiree?
I think it's interesting to look at from a societal and judicial standpoint, like how do we have in place measures from the society to punish crimes in general, and where do we feel like that border should be drawn or line should be drawn? Like, when is it enough so that people will not take matters into their own hands, and when is it so little that the general community do not respect and support the judicial system that makes a whole democracy function? To me, that was super interesting when to put those two quotes up, because of course we can, I mean, not of course, I can also relate to the mom thing. but you also, as a civilized human being and as someone who believes in democracy and the judicial process and all that, like, in order to have a functioning system, we have to have measures in place that will take that responsibility or urge of violence and retaliation or revenge off our shoulders and put it into the hands of someone who is less biased. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, it is a
Linda.
burden. I like the way you say that. It does take the burden off of us to not to have to put ourselves in the position of being uncivilized and all that. Yes.
Linda?
Well, I thought that the only problem I had with what the serial killers were doing was the sadism, the way of doing it. If these are truly evil people, and our society's doing nothing to curb their enthusiasm, then I really thought that up to the point where they were sadistic, I thought, well, good for them. They got rid of some real rotten people in society. And yeah, when it comes down to vengeance, I mean, I have no skills, so all I could do to someone that I wanted to take vengeance is talk them to death or conjugate Icelandic verbs. I mean, I don't have any skills for vengeance. So, but on the other hand, when you have other people execute it, you're still responsible. If we have voted in a repressive regime, those people who voted them in go with the understanding that, well, we have now voted in, so it's on all of us. It's on all of us. We're all the judge and we're all the jury and we're all the executioner, as long as there are laws that to me are stupid. Like, for example, having people being arrested for drugs, unless they are involved in a car crash or do something that hurts other people, I think people should be able to do whatever they want and it shouldn't be criminalized, much like Switzerland does it. But that's not what the attitude is here in the United States. So
No, we
then-
have a very Calvinistic approach to things. If you don't punish someone, then it's just no good. Everything, you don't help people, you punish them. It doesn't work, so you punish them some more. You don't ever
Absolutely.
help them, you just keep punishing them. And to me, I agree with Meg, that makes no sense.
No sense to me. None.
And as we talked about last year, one of the things that is a major difference in the legal system between Denmark and the US is that in Denmark, it's all about resocialization, resocializing all the criminals, getting them back into society, not keeping them under lock and key for life. Their life in Denmark means about 12 years in jail. So that's the highest, I mean, those of you who didn't know that, I mean, that's the highest punishment. If you get life, it's 16 years, and then for good behavior, you get out after 12. And the whole point is that people should be able to enter into society again. So of course that raises the question, can you be, I mean, what you're saying, both Linda and Susan, makes me think about what is the definition of good and what is the definition of evil? Because of course, here in the book, I hope that's what you want to address to, Desiree. No, but here in the book, we see religion being involved in that mix. So is religion what is responsible for having a very clear, you're good, you're evil, and if you're evil, it's okay to dispense with you and you can go to hell, basically. What is it that religion has done to us in the way it's shaped and defined our notion of vengeance, taking the law into our own hands, doing vigilante deeds, etc., and saying that we are justified? And my last question, how do we justify, like you're saying, a government that we choose, how do we justify that such a government can do executions, can be law and execute other people as the ultimate punishment? Is that ever justified? I mean, so I think that what you're saying here raises a ton of questions in my head. That's right.
Yeah, so this is a direction I hadn't really thought about, so it might be a little scattered, but the question of religion and criminal acts, I mean, that's one of the things I don't like about religion, that it takes away the personal responsibility and then it offers you eternal life or whatever, but that is the main problem, like who bears responsibility? You can always say, oh, I grew up on a wrong side of the tracks or something, so that's why I turned out the way I did, which, I mean, I definitely believe in people having different circumstances from the beginning of their lives, but it's not, you know, in my view at least, you have to have a responsibility as an individual. And Karl Mørk is, I think, leaning up against that, but also like with the support system, like I said before, of the system. You had another question I wanted to say something about, but I forget. I have a new puppy, as you can probably all hear. I apologize.
Oh, how cute.
I might get her and take her in my lap because this is like.
Oh, let's see your puppy. Come on.
Okay,
I
I'll
want to
get
see the
her and
puppy.
you
Yeah.
keep discussing. Sorry.
Yes, Annette.
When I was listening to the interview with Jussi, I found it interesting because Desiree brought up this point, and in fact, I think it was the same two quotes that they were discussing. And I think that the idea of revenge, the complications involved in revenge, have been wide open in the United States here for quite a while, and especially last week when we were trying to elect the Speaker of the House, and basic reason for some of those people was hatred of the person that was trying to be put in office. And it was a revenge kind of act based on things he had done, but that's an aside. But anyway, I thought that what Jussi said was very interesting. First of all, when kind of asked about it, he said, well, I can forgive, but I can never forget.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's something my friends and I have talked about a lot, because if you forgive but never forget, have you forgiven? You know, where is that point where you actually have stepped away from it and go on with your life if you never forget? And I think that's the point of
Do you
forgiveness.
think that some things are unforgivable, though?
Yes, I
Not
do.
according to some religions, no, that's it.
No, I
There's nothing
do.
that's not forgivable.
I'm a very bad Quaker. What can I say?
Yeah. But I think it's also interesting that when he made this incredibly evil person who is doing such horrible, sadistic, and evil things, he kind of took away her responsibility for it,
Yep.
because he had this whole thing with the lightning hitting her
Mhm.
and her in an institution. And yeah, she had some problems before, but boy, this lightning thing. So it was confusing what he was trying to say to me. You know, was he talking about revenge, or was he talking about mental illness, or what was he actually trying to get at when he was facing this issue of what do you do with evil people in the world?
But she wasn't executed by the lightning, so she became
Right.
the agent of God.
Yes,
And it was God himself who had put her on this path. And
but that
that's a
was her
scary
head.
thing.
And
No,
we have to, we don't,
yeah,
you know,
but
it's in
that-
her
that's-
head. We
that's
don't
the
know what
thing.
happened to her brain.
No, but that's the thing with the Crusades. When you
Oh,
have a religion and the warfare that's happening today between religions, it's very bad. Organized
Well,
religion is very
someone-
bad. Very
Now,
bad.
someone said before, it's not original to me, that how amazing it is that what God wants is exactly what you've already decided.
Yeah,
That's
yes.
good.
yes.
Well,
That's
it's
good.
also, okay, so if we want to talk about mass murder, I mean, I was thinking also in the light of what you're saying right now about the Spanish Inquisition, which is not Spanish, as my
Yeah.
Spanish friend keeps
Yeah.
saying. It originated in Portugal. But anyway, the Spanish Inquisition and the torture, the sadism, as you were saying, Linda,
Yeah.
in the name of God, and seeing yourself as the angel. This mass murderer, she chose her victims very, very carefully. She was very, very clear in what she needed to do in order to torture them as much as possible. She chose those dates. Why do you think? I mean, she seems like such a sane person, right? She's got a brilliant, thriving company. She's rich. She's well dressed. She's appealing. is that how you see your typical mass murder? I mean, I asked you about any mass murders in the US, and Denmark doesn't have that many. I mean, I tried to look it up, and it's very difficult to find mass murderers in Denmark, unfortunately. But
I'll move there tomorrow.
no, I mean, it's such a bland country. But what do you see as the common denominator here? Because not necessarily based on religion, what would turn you into you know, a Hannibal Lecter? What would turn you into Bundy? I mean, what is it? What happens? Because Raunhild, and that's again my question, I'm circling around to her. Why did she become the person she became, she killed Tabitha, Eva? She had so many reasons, it seems. Where does this mass murderous gene come from, Janet?
Well, I was reflecting on this big situation and murder in Moscow, Idaho, as I was finishing the book, and it all just kind of came all together. I have a friend whose daughter lives in the community and whose son-in-law is a teacher at Moscow, or a professor at Moscow, and it just seemed to be so reflective of what was going on in the book. Like, who can think like this, and how do people even come up with these ideas? And yeah, just from a personal standpoint.
And did you come up with any solutions
No.
or answers?
No, it just left me confused and wondering. And
Well, I think it seems the indication might be that he did it as some kind of academic pursuit, that he was investigating criminology and all that. And it was like, what does a person have to do it? And so he did it like an experiment, you know, for his thesis or whatever.
Oh, those were his lab rats, eh?
Yeah, and which is even sicker than, you know, other things. So it's so dispassionate.
Well,
So are we really talking about mental illness? I mean, all these people,
Yeah.
like you just said, sick. I mean, is it just all mental illness?
No,
No.
no,
No?
no, not every mentally ill person runs around killing people.
And not
Well,
everybody.
Well, they do different things.
They
But
may hurt themselves,
yeah,
or they may isolate themselves. But when you look at serial killers, at least in the United States, the pictures that I see are sort of like, as my daughter said, they're all men. You don't hear about women being serial killers. She pointed that out to me yesterday. And yeah, so I don't know.
Eileen Warnos, but I really don't consider her in the same light as like Bundy and Son of Sam and those people. So
Heidi first, and then let's go back to Desiree. Heidi.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say that. Oh, I do feel like there are some pretty serious psychological issues or mental disorders if someone is engaged in that kind of behavior. I don't think that is that's not within a typical range. So I do feel like there's something very unwell about someone who would commit acts like that.
well, what about somebody who, like, as a business model, and there are many people like that, companies, individuals who have policies that treat people as not human, that say Nestle Corporation, which is responsible for deaths in the third world, which strips, are they mentally ill?
No, I'm not thinking that
No,
type of person.
no.
I think that's power
Yeah.
and control, and like and no limits to get what you want. So you're seeing others as the other who doesn't need to be treated the way you might treat those that you care about.
That's my point, in that serial killers do the same thing. So a serial killer kills 20 people. How is their mindset so much different than a powerful company that kills hundreds and thousands? You know, who's mentally ill in that juxtaposition?
A serial
Really?
killer generally is just one person. That's what I have found or seen. And that person has some disordered thinking around maybe some emotional or traumatic issue in their life. It's not like I've studied this. Maybe I've just watched a lot of television. I don't know.
I think a lot of it is culturally based. A lot of it is culturally based.
Yeah.
I'm sure from the English point of view, what happened at Lindisfarne as the Vikings came down, they must have thought that, whoa, these guys are all mentally ill, if they even had that kind of thought. But it's culturally based. It's culturally based. What
Yeah.
works for one culture, it can be very different from another.
Mhm. So it's a different reason for that
Different values.
injustice. Yeah.
And also politics, Heidi. So,
Yes.
I mean, if you go away from the personal, you get into the political. How can a government kill its own people, execute its own people, kill protesters, etc.? Is that mass murder like you were talking about, Susan? I mean, how many does it have before it is not the individual, but just a power grabbing some kind of ruler? Sorry, Desiree, you've been sitting there for a long time.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. The whole family just walked in and the puppy and stuff. But I think to bring it back a little bit to the book that, and what was just said about culture, that the sectarian part of it, and having been raised in a sect myself, I really related to a lot of this, that the culture within that community will also allow for a way of acting and thinking that the surrounding society does not accept or believe in. But if you have more than one, or like in this instance, you have a group of followers, then you can find people who will support your way of thinking and then normalize it. And that's definitely what I've seen. And the cover up of, I know that, you know, I'm not saying that all sects are mass murderers, but there is definitely in every like closed system that has their own judicial system and a sort of parallel society where they have their own closed judicial system that might again go against what the surrounding society, like how we conduct things.
Can I kind of piggyback on that and say, what about radicalization? Because that's another issue that he raises in this context of having sects or people who are radicalized. And I think that if we want to link this book to the previous book, that is one of the segues we can use, because in the previous book, it was all about being radicalized and trying to do something, a terrorist action, and also get into the minds of a lot of people. And in this book, we see the continuation with Assad's daughter, the daughter who was with all these extremists and who became radicalized. So how do you see that? Is that part of the issue, or is it just like he's trying to append some other issue to discuss in the book with radicalization, immigration, being part of a society, being part of a community, or being an outsider who can then find a reason to kill or terrorize? Is that something that you can connect to this theme that we've been talking about of vengeance and mass murder? I don't know if any of you had any thoughts in that direction.
Well, now I do.
Yeah.
like now it's like, oh yeah, of course, even to bring in the central storyline of the fact that radicalization can happen with Christians too, which is not something we hear a lot in the news, in the media. The stereotype when we hear radicalized, religious extremist, for me, I instantly assume we're talking about an Islamic extremist. And to actually kind of weave this entire story around, the type of radicalization that we don't initially view in the same way or analyze through the same lens, like that. Yeah, I can see that. I hope other readers were more astute to see that than I was at the time I was paging through the book.
Well, no, because I think that white Christian nationalism is more of a threat to us than Islamic terrorism in this country, at any rate. Maybe not in Europe, but here for sure. That are much more present. What is it called? Something in present danger.
We are in present danger.
I think that what he's trying to do is being a little bit more discreet than he was in his previous book about radicalization and Denmark. Right now, right before we started this, I was reading the news. I read Danish newspapers every day, just out of habit since, teaching for so many years. And the new chairman of the Committee for Danish Citizenship
Yeah.
has made the very radical statement that he's going to look at the country from which people are coming when they apply for citizenship. Because he says, well, and he is 27 years old and hence very experienced and sage. That came out wrong. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But he is 27 years old and a new member of the parliament. And he's saying, well, we've seen that most of the problems come with people who come from Islamic countries. Of course, these statements created quite an uproar, and most of the other political parties are saying, absolutely not. This is not the criterion we're going to use when we choose whether people should obtain citizenship or not. But he has voiced what in this book Assad was saying when he said, well, there's such shitheads, all these people he's killing, that it's okay. And everybody was thinking, oh yeah, I probably think the same thing, but I'm not going to say it out loud. This new young minister, he voiced it. And to me, that's disconcerting. So where do you draw the line? Racism, bigotry, prejudice, or protecting yourself against terrorism? And it becomes a very personal question, doesn't it? Yes, right.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that because that is putting your hand, as we say in Danish, into a bee's nest. So I'm not doing that. But I do think before you said what you just said, Nita, that's one of the things I really liked about this book, that it's not about the color of your skin. It's not about religion. It's about your mindset, where you are as a person, as an individual, who you are at the core. And yeah, I'm not going to comment on the other thing because it can end badly.
No, but I did not mean for it to be that kind of provocative question. It's just that whenever there is a school shooting, an act of terrorism, I wonder what it is that make these people who are the chosen ones want to do it, want to be a suicide bomber. You can go back through wars and so on. What is it that propels you forward into an action that is self-destructive or destructive for other people? And I think that is one of the questions he's raising here. And I think, I wanted to bring in Gordon, because Gordon is Mr. Bland and he's Mr. Nice Guy and totally, and his pathetic thoughts about his pathetic love life are very appealing and very, I feel like he's such a sweet man, and I feel so sorry for him. And then at the end, all of a sudden his character evolves and he's the one who says all these very astute things to the mass murderer Sislik. And you're saying, what happened to this man? How did he find this kind of character in himself, within himself? So that's the good radicalization, if you want to call it that. So it also shows that there are two sides of that you can also find the force and the energy, I think, to stand up against something that is unfair and unjust, even though he knows that it might end up costing him his life, as she's planning. I don't know if you have any comments about that aspect of the book.
Maybe he got tired of being stepped on and overlooked, and it just got to be too much for him, and there's a lot going on underneath. I think what that character development is about, that he's not this superficial, bland person. There's a lot going on underneath. So I liked it.
Mhm.
I enjoyed seeing that.
Because he's such a contrast to Rose, our feisty feminist.
I'm waiting for them to get together for some strange reason, you know? He has such a crush on her, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Desiree, do you want to continue?
Well, maybe it also shows that when we're faced with life-changing events, we have quite of a big choice to make in life. Who do we want to be and what direction do we want to go in? And some people will choose to go to a sect that will give them structure and discipline and tell them, you know, how to live their lives. Other people will turn more inward and reckon with the way they have been before and want to make changes. So that might also, like you're talking about two sides of the coin, right? I think that's what I took away, that again, yeah, I'm done.
I saw a change in Carl.
Yes.
It seems like he's mellowed in this 9th book, and I don't want to say matured, but I think he's mellowed and he's much more accepting than he was in any of the other books. And maybe fatherhood has done that for him. I don't know, but he wasn't the cantankerous old man that I've always had him in my mind, even though I keep flashing back to the movies, which is totally not Carl, but we talked about that before.
Definitely. That's true. Cindy.
Yeah, you had asked earlier about, and I think I might pronounce it incorrectly, Renheld?
Yeah, is I don't know. Is it use the same name in the translation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the
Okay.
Danish translation is Ragnhild.
Brownhill. Okay. Brownhill.
Crazy.
Well, she was interesting, and her story was kind of told in pieces, but when I pieced it together, she had quite the horrible upbringing. And they described at the time her father told her freckles were evil coming out of her, that she was evil. Her father kicked a little puppy. And then later when they were interviewing her mother told more of the story, which was, well, I don't know why she lied and said her father used a hanger on her, so clearly implying sexual abuse. And then she ultimately killed her father. So it's interesting. I mean, she clearly was a child crying out for help in some way. And there was definitely a theme of her, the posters that she had in her bedroom as well, of revenge and the good guys, good over evil. And then full circle, when she found the group with Deborah, it started off just making people be good, and the bikes, the umbrellas and the bikes. But it seemed like she really was seeking verification, being part of a group, which I think, to your question about how do people become radicalized, I think traumatic childhood, and then, this seeking for connection and a place and a way to define themselves.
Understands them, right?
Yes.
About 15 years ago, there was a British guy who started a movement called Follow Me. He wrote a book about it. And the whole gist of this movement was that once a week, you should do something nice and unexpected. Like somebody in a cafe, you would pay for their drink. And, not necessarily to get thanks, just to do something nice. So he started a movement, which is quite the opposite of what you're explaining here, Cindy, which is like, I was hurt and harmed, so let me be a vigilante, which is interesting, right? And of course, the reason I thought about it was that your question raises, do we have a choice? Can we choose to be good? Or are we just such victims of our circumstances that if we are maltreated, we will be nasty people?
My personal belief is absolutely we do have a choice. It makes me think, though, that the more we can as societies invest in children and help, those that certainly makes it easier. But, every time that you have an opportunity to reach out to someone and bring kindness to them, it could be, seriously putting their life on a path towards paying that forward and generating kindness.
Yeah. Mhm.
I wonder if Assad's character, provides a model of, he's experienced, extremely difficult, life altering background. And he often voices those, well, who's going to miss these guys anyway, opinions that no one else wants to say out loud. But yet he buys into the social contract of this is a culture governed by laws, and that we are going to treat everyone based on the system of laws that we all uphold. And so he's almost maybe a middle ground character of a different way of overcoming just so much trauma in his background.
He's also very much, for me, a family character. And I like it when you're saying that Karl Merck is mellowing out and becoming the dad to this little baby that is, just the love of his life at this moment. Assad seems to be a very protective character for his family. He's got all these very funny stories again. And the second time I read, I really kind of focused on his funny camel stories because they're such a joy to read in the book. So he's also, for me, representing the very, very good guy, regardless of his background and regardless of the fact that he's killed more people than anybody else probably in the book. I mean, hints always that he's been the person who's been very, very radicalized for good, maybe, but definitely a killer by profession earlier on. And now he is a family guy trying to build a new life in this new country. So I think he does a very nice, well, I guess that I'm saying that his array of characters in this book is very interesting because there's so many different types to choose from. Who do we want to look at? Like I said, Rose, when you were mentioning, Gordon, I brought up Gordon, Rose, who's definitely a different person now. She's been through her ups and downs too, with her mental diseases. It seems like nobody's quite normal. And of course, that brings me to that very, very burning question. What is it with Karl and committing crimes? Did he do that? Was he part of this drug deal? Why is it that all of a sudden Jussi turns around, takes our pretty, maybe not beloved, but at least affectionately cared for main character and turns him into a potential criminal? How did you feel about that? Was that a twist you saw coming?
I think Marcus is involved in it. That's my prediction, that it will turn out to be that Marcus is setting him up.
I'm writing that down, Susan. We'll see.
You can hold me to it. If I'm wrong, I'll admit it.
Heidi?
I've been reading the book since the beginning, and I remember that there was so many questions in those maybe first couple books about what happened. Everything was just a hazy recollection about what happened during that particular series of events. And I never thought that he was guilty, but now I guess in the last book we'll find out. So I've always wondered, how will that be resolved? What's going to happen with that? Did he do it or didn't he do it, kind of thing? I don't know.
It's definitely been going through all the books. It's always been in the background. Remember the whole thing about the plaid shirt in the beginning, and what was happening, and why was he lying there instead of getting up and grabbing his gun and trying to shoot the shooter, etc., etc. Very, very mysterious. So nobody has any kind of guesses apart from Susan, who thinks Marcus is involved. Yeah.
I always wondered why Karl felt so guilty about Hardy. Because when, when you're in a situation like that, you don't always know how you're going to react, no matter what your training is. But he went to such extents to make what up to Hardy.
Yeah.
Whereas it wasn't his responsibility. Hardy was not his responsibility, but he made him his responsibility. So yeah, that there is always that question. Was he complicit? But I'm going to stick by my prediction.
That's good. I also had a question there about the reality of Cecil Park. We've talked about her mental illness, potential mental illness. Do you think that she is a realistic picture of somebody that you might, have in your world, in our world here in the US? Is he going too far? Is she too extreme? How do you feel about Cecil Park? Annette?
Well, living in Wisconsin, where we have Ed Gein and what's the guy here in Milwaukee? Two of some of the most frightening, I think, serial killers that have been caught.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer,
Yeah.
that's right. Yes. Oh, how soon we forget. I guess I thought, because I really do believe that something I think she had problems before. I think that lightning and the whole thing, I think we were meant to believe that did something to her, that she was not necessarily someone who was created by her parents or created by society, but someone who had something happen to her that had also increased the problems that she had. But I found her believable.
Mhm.
And when you were talking about how organized she was and how well things were planned, I don't think that necessarily is something that mentally ill people couldn't do. I mean, I think that people with lots of problems can be very organized and can be very careful in their planning. Look at the Unabomber. I mean, he was brilliant, but nuts. So I think she's believable.
Katie?
I don't think so. I guess I thought that she was pretty contrived. And then I was willing to go along with it in terms of the book and where the story led us, but I didn't believe that she was a real character. I mean, in the book she was, yes, but I don't know.
Would you say she was on the spectrum, and to the extent that she was that organized and obsessive and controlled and successful?
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
Or to me,
She could have been an actuary, actually. Yeah, it's a whole profession of very odd people.
Yes, right. A little
Yeah.
cold-blooded.
Okay. Right. I also have a question about, not actors, question about the use of technology in the book. Because there is the question of video surveillance, right? Hate mails and all those different ways we have today of, one, keeping track of everything in our lives, two, sending out evil sounding mails and really nasty stuff, suicides committed because of TikTok or whatnot. How do you see this in the book? Do you find that there's anything there worth discussing, or is it just, have we just reached a level where we say, oh yeah, there are cameras everywhere, and so we're just used to that and we'll accept that, and it's probably for our own good? Have we all kind of fallen into that it's for our own protection mode? Or how do you see that? Because to me, it still stands out a lot. The surveillance society.
it gives me the creeps. I don't like to think of being surveilled every time I walk down the street, and being able to track myself. Not that anyone is particularly interested. I don't think the government is particularly interested in me. I mean, I've had friends who thought the government was watching them all the time, and I didn't want to tell them, you're really not that important. So I just didn't say anything. But I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like the surveillance society. I don't like the ability. And yes, it has really good law enforcement uses, but I think it's going too far. I really do.
Well, I feel safer. we just recently wired up our whole outside of our house with cameras and lights. Not my idea, but on the other hand, it's cute to see the fox come around the garage. But yeah, ever since people got cell phones, no, people aren't getting away. And ever since DNA testing was invented, people aren't getting away with the kind of crimes that they got away with in the past. They just can't do it. It's going to be on camera somewhere, or someone's going to take a picture and it's going to wind up on TikTok or something like that. So I got a message from Google today that said, did I know I was being tracked by myself? My tracker was on, and I thought, oh, hell no. And I shut it off. I may keep a diary on paper because I'm gameldays and old fashioned, but I don't want to have anyone else keep track of me.
But I just want to add here before Desiree, that you do know that there's a huge difference in Denmark and the US. In Denmark, you cannot escape. You are always being watched and everybody knows everything about you. I mean, the state knows everything about you, which is really interesting. When I moved to the US and I thought, okay, here you can just kind of cross the border and go into another state. You don't have to pay child support. In Denmark, you may not disappear. So there's a little bit of a difference. And I think maybe we're reaching the same level here, but it's definitely, you are under a microscope in microscopic Denmark. Desiree.
Several things. Yeah, I know that Denmark is, I've said this before, but it's a country that many other researchers travel to or go to because we have everything written down and it's easily accessible. But yeah, there is, without, I think it changed names, but without the NemID or whatever, you can't book an appointment, you can't get a book, you can't look at your income and all that. And it's all in one place. So we'll see what happens when it gets hacked. Anyway, what I think he's also, Jussi is touching on, and he did in the previous book as well, is like mental health in youth. We don't have enough data because it's still fairly new, the way we use, for instance, social media. And every time, like, it's a big discussion, right? But there those who talk about being worried, like myself, and having a timer on my kids and stuff, how long they can be online, are extremely antiquated, old-fashioned, and you risk, like, my kids can't do what they're supposed to do if they're not on Instagram. So we had to allow that, right? For school things. My son's school was in highly surveillance yesterday because another kid from another school on Snapchat and somewhere else had made a thread with a picture of weapons. So it's also about like, how do we educate our kids to be civilians in this new reality that we were not brought up in? How do we model the right behavior when we did not experience it ourselves? And I think that's something we still haven't learned how to do. And kids can get, like, it creates a lot of fear. It creates a surrounding society, of course, to be an alert. It creates, now this kid will have a record on him. Apparently he did it for fun or whatever. It's not fun, but it will be on his public record forever. Like, we don't know how to teach our kids to have the right behavior online. And it creates a multitude of problems also in terms of bullying. And yeah, I don't have the answers, but it's a problem.
And then after 2 years of lockdown, I can only imagine the mental grief that children have gone through, and adults, we as adults are going through a significant thing, but they're developing. And I think that is going to have a profound effect 20 years from now, what you're going to see in society.
Absolutely. And I live in a community with 50% are born in other countries. Like, this will, some of them carry trauma with them. So we have had a 50% decrease in who was in the classes. What does that mean? That means that those who actually told their kids to go to school, did we make the right decision? Do they, like, now their teaching is disrupted? Like, it's just added on anxiety on so many multiple levels, and it all stems from online behavior or lack of. So
Academia. Nancy?
I think that is a very good question, and I think the author brings it up when he has Assad talking about his son who did not have all of the technology when he was growing up, and how it is serving to exclude him rather than include him in yet one more way from the broader society. So very interesting. I think Desiree's interview with the author and his concerns about power, good power and bad power, certainly would include the whole matter of the technology. So probably something he will further develop in book number, is it 10 next? Yes.
Thank you. And unless anybody has any kind of additional comment, yes, Annette?
I just have a question. What is the title of this book in Danish? And is this a good translation of the title?
Horrible translation.
Okay, how would you translate that? Because I don't like the title, and that doesn't matter, but I just wondered that.
It's salt.
Yeah.
It's natrium chloride. Natrium chloride. It's salt.
Yeah, yeah, that's so much better. That's so much better. They could have called it salt.
Why did they change
Salt.
it? I mean, it
Yeah,
There's nothing about shadow there, really.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
the salt murders.
well, there's something sweet about shadow murders. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
No,
like,
But
oh, it's a shadow murder. Don't worry about it.
and then I was quite surprised because I kept looking for the book under this name. I thought, oh, they're certainly not going to translate natrium chloride. I mean, they're just going to write that, or sodium chloride or whatever. And nope, shadow murders.
I'm
What
glad-
is next month's book? I haven't seen the.
Next, thank you for asking that. That is The Fall of the King, which I should say, is voted as the best book of the century.
Oh,
in
no,
Denmark.
no.
Who is
Yeah,
You mean Lucky Pear wasn't the best book? Come on now.
well,
Who is
2000,
the author of that book, The Fall of the King?
Oh, wow.
Fall of the King by Johannes V. Jensen. It was in 2000 voted the best book of the previous century.
Huh.
So many had asked, please let us read that. So yeah, that's why it's on the list as the
Okay.
class. And it's taken place in the late 1400s and early 1500s in Denmark, historical moments. And I think it's going to be a very interesting, very different discussion we get, but he's the best writer. He's very deep, et cetera. But I just want to tell you all, I'm really disappointed because I thought I was going to go away today with a definition of what it is to be good and what it is to be evil.
That's culturally based. Yeah.
No, but thank you so much for a wonderful discussion of
Thank
what I
you.
find to be a really wonderful book. Thank you so much for all your
Thank
contributions.
you.
Let's
you.
meet again in a month and see each other and have fun.